Hey guys, welcome back to the Hobby Drop. So today's video is nice and short. We've already demonstrated the majority of techniques that I wanted to run through with this series, and then we'll go through and show the practical applications of them in future videos. There is one more thing I really wanted to go through today for you, and it's a little complex, but it's a very simple thing to do. I know that sounds counterintuitive. Give me a sec. I'll pop back up in the video later on to explain it to you and probably go over a little more detail about it. That being said, guys, let's just get back to it. Cool. So first up, it's super simple. All we're going to do is reshape the piece on both sides to give a far more rigid or angular. And we do that simply by doing it the same way we did in the other videos. We just take a knife, scrape it down the side until we get the rough shape we want, and then we clean it up with files and sanding blocks. If you want to know more about that, jump into our previous video where we delve into it a little more. So now the real work starts. What we're doing here is we're placing 3 pieces of tape. Placement is extremely important in this context, and I do it slightly backwards here, but I'll explain why in a second. Essentially, I place 3 pieces. I place the piece on the left, then the right, and then the top. Now, the kicker behind this is that you need to make sure that the gaps on the tape sides are equidistant from each other so that it looks balanced. And to be honest, as long as it's pretty close, it'll work, but grab a digital caliper and measure it anyway. From there, simply scribe it in just like normal. First the one on the left and the right, or right then left, however you want to do it. Nice and easy. And then we commit complete heresy by scribing all the way through until it punches through the other side. Now, don't be afraid to bust out the knife. I know, scary, right? And really dig that cut out more if your scribing tool isn't really doing it. The added benefit is we then need to cut the sides off. So you'll see here that I've done exactly that. Once it's scribed all the way through, clean cut, nice and flush, I then use the knife and simply cut off the pieces of tape here and here. And the reason for that is simple and obvious. We're just going to scribe along the top now. Now on this scribe, you don't want to go as deep, you don't want to cut all the way through, but you do want to go slightly deeper than you normally would. It'll be more obvious in a second, but you want to go about halfway through the plastic plate if possible, at least if you're trying to replicate this exact effect that we accomplish here. Hey, okay, so this is the thing I was talking about. Now, what we're trying to do here is we're taking this very flat and very boring calf piece, and what we're doing is, this is a calf, apparently. What we're doing is we're effectively separating pieces of it, and then we're trying to change the plane or the angle of that piece. And the reason we do this is to try and add a sense of life or separation to the part. I don't see a lot of people doing this. I've seen a couple of really high-end Korean builds where they'll actually take the piece and they'll cut it out in a perfect shape, and they'll either put it below or above the piece exactly where it was, right? And that sounds weird, but when you look at it in practice, it looks like the parts aren't alive as such, but it looks like there's some animation to them. There's some planes of interest or detail to them, right? It's the same concept as up detailing, but when you, back to our calf piece, if you do something like create a flap and change the position of that, it looks like the part is separate. It looks like it was engineered that way. It looks like there's a purpose behind it. It's a weird effect, I know, to think about conceptually, but as soon as we're done with this, you look at it and you go, oh yeah, I see kind of when he was doing that. Hopefully, or you won't, and I look like a dickhead. So, cool. That being said, let's go get it done. Cool. So now we have the outline of our flap. And what we're going to do now is really try and detail this up before we put the finishing touches and really add to the flap effect. The first thing I'm going to do is mark out some gaps for hinges, and I'll eventually put some detail in here so that I add to the overall effect, or so it looks like some kind of mechanical thing is in there to make this flap hinge up and down. So this is important because this is kind of the way I tackle any wider chisel or scribe. You have a lower piece of tape shown here, and then you put a piece of tape along the scribing line, so match the scribing line on both the left and the right sides. So essentially you've made a giant square box right here. And what that allows you to do is then chisel towards the edge at all times, and it makes sure that both sides of the wider chisel mark as well as the edge are all very, very flush and very, very straight. Obviously I'm still practicing this because I'm kinda crappy at it. Anyway, in this slide we basically do 3 separate things. The first thing is put some detail, some pla beam, styrene beam, plasticide beam, whatever you want to call it, small sticks of plastic into the holes to replicate hinges. Separately I shape these so they look more like hinges. It's completely up to you. The second thing I do is I actually come in with a knife at this angle and shape the top of the hinge. And the reason I do that is because it then looks like it kind of tapers towards the gap, if that makes sense. So it kind of looks like the original piece, using my magical imagination, was actually tapered or machined that way that it was designed to flap up, and that adds to the optical illusion. And the third and final part is the secret sauce, or the magic trick, if there was one for this technique. I actually run a very small amount of Tamiya extra thin cement right along this gap here, and that's why we only cut halfway through it before. And what that'll actually do is create a slight contraction and a weakening of that point, and it will pull the part up and slightly away from the sides. And what you can do is, as it's still a little wet and starting to soften, gently taper it up. You can see that demonstrated here. And that's it. I'm going to scoot through the next part pretty quick because I went through this in a lot of depth in the last video. Usual deal, glue some stuff on, shape a template, make a framework, and repeat it on other sides. What's really interesting about the way I did this, these side detailing parts, is the next bit, which is the scribing. So once this template is firmly secured and dried, carefully scribe around the outside perimeter of it, same as we've done in the other videos. So what I wanted to do was mirror some of those design elements that we spoke about in the first couple of videos onto this calf piece to try and tie the shin and the calf together. And I did that by marking it out with, again, my favorite measurement techniques, which is using a 3mm piece of tape and a 6mm piece of tape. Again, you can see the shape that I'm going for here, and the idea is that I use this big piece as a stop for the scribe that is outlined with the bottom piece, or the thinner piece. From there I thought it would be a really cool idea to try and remove this bottom corner. So I marked it with a 3mm piece because that's how much I wanted to remove, and then I used a larger, harder piece to really help me guide the scribe. In this instance I'm just using the smaller piece of tape to give me that exact 3mm measurement, so it's easy to replicate on the other sides and add symmetry. Then you guessed it, we just scribe all the way through that over and over again until it's a nice clean cut, and then we file it back or sand it back. So to really draw attention to this detail element, I came back and I put some tape down and I ran a thicker scribing tool down this line and this line, and again paid special attention to cut these little corner notches out so that it looks like it was manufactured that way and it never had a corner piece on the end to begin with. So super simple finish, usual deal, 3mm piece of tape and just scribe it in the middle, and now it looks pleasantly like the piece we did on the shin. So that's it guys, again super simple, break it down into micro steps. I've realized that these picture step-by-steps are really dry sometimes, so I'm going to try and take some footage next time and mix the two techniques up to try and add some visual interest because it's getting a bit stale. Outside that, thank you again for watching. Please like, subscribe, share it around, it really helps me out, and I'll see you guys next time. So you change the plane. This is not a plane. This is I don't know what. Pro tip: if you record a lot of stuff, make sure your microphone is on. Little bit skidoosh. How cool is Iron Man? I know. Hates it.